All right, folks, I better start all this because it's not about me at all. It's actually about Conor. And some things were mentioned there that I think I'd like to kind of break it down into two little points. And that is this: I'd like to talk about his work for those of you who may not know. I'd like to go back over it. And then I want to talk about Conor himself and what the hell his problem actually is. So, Conor, let's take a look. It was mentioned earlier on. By the way, anybody who has a question at any stage, please ask the question, because this is the man who's going to answer the question better than I will. It was mentioned earlier on about Dramsoc. Now, I don't want to say, wasn't Dramsoc wonderful, and you're really glad you joined Dramsoc, and every student should join Dramsoc. But when you joined Dramsoc, did you make this theatre company? Did you devise this theatre company? Because you had no other way of getting your work shown.
Well, I suppose that problem hadn't occurred to me because I never really wanted to be a playwright. I wanted to be a musician. I was playing music in bands. That's what I wanted to do. And my parents were really kind of worried about that because they thought I was kind of going to be going nowhere. I'd left school at 16. I was quite young, doing my leaving and all that. And they said, well, why don't you go to college? And I said, why would I need to go to college? I don't need to go to college. And they were like, well, if you go to college, you can have plenty of free time to play music. I said, okay. So I applied for arts in UCD, which I got, and then I just didn't know then what I had to do after that. We came out to UCD. I remember my dad drove me and a neighbour, Jones Irwin, out on the first day of the term, and we had to come out and pick our subjects. I didn't know what to pick, so I picked English because I thought, okay, read a few books. I had to pick 3 subjects. I picked psychology because I thought we'd be just looking at rats in a box or something. And I picked philosophy because I thought, well, that's probably going to be really easy. Like, what is nothing? Fine, I could do that. But then once I started into studying, I suddenly really got into it, and I started reading plays and just got really taken by that and thought, well, in the summer between first and second year, I wrote a little one-act play, and I don't know, it just popped out, and I brought it down to Dramsoc, and I showed it to them, and they said, well, who's going to direct it? And I said, well, I don't know anybody. I'd never even seen a play in Dramsoc, and I said, well, I'll direct it, and I essentially, I really feel like I'm sitting here now. That feels like 3 weeks ago. Yeah. And that's exactly just what I've been doing since. Okay,
you do make, of the 2 main subjects, English and philosophy, were there epiphany moments in either one? Like, I know in the past you've said something along the lines of that, for instance, in English, it was Glengarry Glen Ross. Something about that, or something about David Mamet, who you drop a lot, and I can understand that 100%. And the other one being, just as we're on, in philosophy, you mentioned the nothing word there. The fact is that, like, when you were told at one stage that everything we know is nothing, or we all know nothing, or whatever, was this a sort of a door that opened? You say, I don't feel so bad now. Is that it?
Well, yeah, the David Mamet thing was, I suppose, as a young man, his plays are very aggressive. They're full of swearing, and you kind of go, this is really cool, you know, and I liked all that. And the first play that I wrote was sort of trying to imitate that, really. And but the philosophy thing, yeah, was just the whole Socratic notion that you have to accept your ignorance before you can learn anything in life. And of course, that's brilliant because you kind of go, no, it's really important that you don't know anything. So it's a fantastic get out of jail card. But actually, there is a serious side to that in terms of things like morality and politics and, you know, and learning to think for yourself and not just to accept what people tell you. So all of that was very exciting. UCD, I'm here today, and I'm glad to be here tonight because UCD did change my life. I'm sure it changes everybody's life who comes here, but I really sort of awoke as a person in UCD, and I'm still very grateful.
And it is important to remember that you said earlier on that you were someone who didn't even want to come here. You didn't see any reason why.
No, not really. I didn't. I thought, look, it's only a matter of time before we get our album deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Was that university in general, as in third level? You didn't?
No, well, I just didn't see the point. It was just like I just couldn't wait to get out of school.
Okay, one of the things about Dramsoc, or one of the things about putting on your own plays, be it Fly By Night or whatever it is, you learn a lot about things that you have to, because you've got to be a bit of a dog's body. So you learn a lot about lighting, about visuals. People talk about all the stuff you do of loving silhouettes and all this kind of thing. Now, that's one thing I want to mention now, because that hasn't been mentioned earlier. Movies. I mean, there's just as many movies. We've got 3 or 4 movies, another huge one on its way out, already been shown at Tribeca, etc. We'll get to that in a second. And we've mentioned Daphne du Maurier and The Birds, etc. But is it true that you think you learned an awful lot of stuff in terms of the dram sock days that you would never have even thought you would have learned until years later you had to kind of draw on those resources?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I had like 5 years because I came here in 1988 and I didn't leave until 1993 when I'd done an MA. And I had all those years of just putting plays on, kind of in a room, not, only about half the size of this, but in LG1. But it was an incredible experience because you just learn how it works and how long it takes to rehearse a play, how hard it is to do it, how hard it is to make it work, what a play needs to be interesting, all those things. But I learned them completely in that kind of very protective cocoon. So by the time I left, I was so kind of into it that I was as driven doing that then as I was with playing music. I had switched, but I was like, it's only a matter of time before I start, making a living at this. But if I hadn't had the dram sock, I don't know how I could have.
And the kind of people that you liked in music, or the kind of people that you might have wanted to emulate, or whatever it happens to be, were they the kind of people who were saying things in their lyrics that were kind of exorcising some kind of demons? Because we could say that that's what you're trying to do an awful lot of the time in a lot of the plays that you've written.
Well, I went through lots of different musicals. When I was 10, I really woke up to music. Well, the first music I remember probably when I was a little kid, I always remember Bohemian Rhapsody sticking in my head when I was only about 4. And I remember the Carpenters. I remember my mum was always singing, I'm on top of the world, looking down on creation. I always sort of remember that one. But then when I was about 10, there was a Christmas where they were showing all the Beatles films, and that just completely blew my mind altogether. And I just said, I have to get a guitar. And so that was the point. So then the Beatles. Then what would I have got into then? Probably when I was about 14 or 15, kind of a gothy kind of phase, like The Cure, which then took me into a kind of more punky kind of thing, Husker Du, all that kind of stuff. But then through Husker Du into a more kind of jingly, jangly, teenage fan clubby, the Birdsy kind of stuff. Then into that kind of, through that into the sort of countryish, Jayhawks, Wilco, that kind of direction. So it was always that kind of very singer-songwritery kind of thing. And so, but I was never really one for lyrics. As a writer, I sort of, like, I've never got, I can see why people like Bob Dylan, but I was never into Bob Dylan. Because to me it was all about just endless verses, but I was always much more into the music. So, ironically, but exercising demons, I don't know, the feeling of music was always a thing for me, not the message of music. And I think for me, the feeling of plays.
Oh, that's kind of the feeling of plays then, just in terms of the writing. Do you set out to write in any way at all about your own experiences, or do you try and avoid them in your writing and just can't?
Oh, you have to write about your own experiences.
I mean, you never try to sort of like evade all that bit and say, I'm going to try and write something as a third person, and you find yourself drawn back all the time.
Well, you do. You sort of disguise it as the third person, but but everything that's happening, unless you felt it, the audience are not going to feel it, I don't think. So, even though it seems like it's not you, on some level it is. On some level it's a picture of your own.
Broken relationships, death, disappointment, alcohol abuse.
Yeah.
Where did all that fit in there now, Sonny?
Well, but everybody has experienced those things.
Haven't
they? But those are the universal things. I mean, you do. Well, like, what's worth writing about is love and death and, disappointment. Those are the things that we all struggle with. Confusion. Those are all the things that we all have to deal with, I think, every day and sort of make some kind of peace with. So I suppose the characters that I write usually tend to be right at the edge of those experiences, but it's really, really heightened, of course. And but it has to have that for me. I'm not a light playwright. I think my plays they're funny, but that's never really usually that intentional. What happens is when I write a play, it's usually I have some really deep thing that I'm trying to get into and do, and then when you show it in front of an audience, what happens is that when people get together in a room in the dark, they sort of want to have a good time, and they sort of tend to laugh at things that you didn't even think were going to be funny. Then, of course, the actors go, ding, laugh, ding, that's not laugh, ding, oh, great. And then, of course, they sort of line them all up.
Of course,
And then, of course, as the nights go on, they sort of do that. But I would never try and stop that. I think that that's just a natural thing,